Hi everyone, welcome back to I See Melanie, and today we're talking about Season 3, Episode 2 of The Bear, entitled Next. Now, this is the second time I'm shooting this video because the first time didn't work out. Word to the wise, do a mic check before you film a YouTube video. But that extra time gave me the allowance to see comments from my first video of episode 1, where I mentioned that I did not like the premiere. I thought it was basically filler and that I didn't learn anything new about the storyline, or I didn't really deepen any understanding I had of the characters. I still feel that way. A lot of people feel differently. That is okay. We're allowed to have different opinions. And I did mention in that video that I felt the second one was much better, and it was. It's return to bear form. So in this video today, I'll just talk about the main beats and different interpretations I had in the situation, in particular Carmy, because this is a very Carmy-centric episode. All right, so I'll start off with one thing. Again, I love the city of Chicago. I've only been there twice, in April, and not the warmest of times, because I know Chicago is a place that can be really cold and really hot, kind of like Toronto, where I am from, but a bit more extreme on both ends. I say all that to say I think Chicago is a beautiful city. I do not like the rap it gets in the media all the time. I don't think it's fair. I'm not saying things are inaccurate, but I think there's a lot of bias. Anyway, whatever. So in this video, in this show, we see a little montage of Chicago life. And again, I love seeing Chicago. I love seeing the people of Chicago. I did feel as though the montage went on a little too long. So I know people think I'm anti-montage. I'm not, but I think there's a time and place for those types of things. And to me, it almost felt like a Chicago travel PSA, in a way. I'm nothing against that because I love traveling to Chicago, but I just thought I should mention that. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. So we see Sid at home in the apartment with her dad. She's getting ready for the day. And basically what I take from this is that, she's kind of outgrowing the space. She needs her own space so that she can move around her place freely. And so obviously she has a great relationship with her dad. We've known this, but she needs to find her own place. So that was basically one part of it. The bulk of it happens in the kitchen of the restaurant. So last week we saw Carmy with a bunch of plates on the kitchen table at around 3:30 in the morning. And we see he's there at 8 o'clock in the morning now. So this leads us to believe that he has gotten no sleep. He's been there the entire time and he's got the full day ahead of him. So we all know that for most of us, operating with no sleep is not good. For Carmy, it definitely isn't good. We see Carmy interact with his sister and she's looking a little bit down. And then Carmy asks her what's going on. And she said, it's kind of a heavy thing for 8 o'clock in the morning. And then he says, say it. And she says that she's, worried about, motherhood and everything that entails. And then he mentions, that's more of a 4 o'clock kind of discussion. But what I would say to that, because I love the Carmy's character so much, is that I feel as though that's showing a lot of growth on his end. Because I remember last year, he made a comment like, I don't really ask how people are doing because I'm doing so badly. What right or what can I really offer to a conversation to somebody else? So the fact that he asked his sister what was wrong, even though he did say it's kind of heavy for right now, I feel as though that shows growth in him. And I love Carmy and I like seeing that in him. Carmy has decided that there are two major things he wants to implement for the restaurant. One being a list of non-negotiables that will direct how everyone in the restaurant operates on a daily basis. So this is a list of about 10 different things with some, straightforward bullet points and some less tangible things like vibrant collaboration or pursuit of excellence or focus and things like that. And not to say that those things are very elusive, but they're not very measurable. And considering the fact that there are a lot of different personality types working in the kitchen, printing out goals like this, I don't really think is very helpful to many of the different people there. Like Carmy and Sid, they're at this level caliber. Not that the other people are incompetent or anything like that, but they're just not thinking about the restaurant in the same way that Sid or Carmy would be, because they're not owners and they're not, the culinary masterminds, right? And that's not a slight against anybody. That's just the nature of things, right? Like, if you work for an organization, you want to do your work well, you want to be good at it, but you're not going to have that same level of investment as your CEO or the president, and you really shouldn't. Right? And in this episode here, we see they're talking about the DocuSign. So yeah, obviously, yes, Sid is going to be invested in this restaurant. So she is invested in the restaurant, but they're going to hammer out those details. Carmy mentions we have to be excellent every single day. And his Sugar's like, Carmy, come on. And I agree with her, because Carmy, one of his traits that I feel he needs to work on, well, he has two major, he has a lot of traits that he needs to work on, but two of them are his workaholic ismness. I don't know how to describe it, but he works like crazy. And also the fact that he's a perfectionist, because he is not perfect and he's not supposed to be. He's human. He's also working with, I don't know, maybe 20 people in the restaurant. When you've got that many people working, things are going to go awry, and they're going to go awry more so the more people you have, the more cooks you have in the kitchen. The reliability of a system, of any system, whether it's a computer system, whether it's a family system, whether it's a workplace system, the more elements you have, the more likelihood you have for things to go awry, and the reliability of that becomes lessened. So the idea that he thinks that we need to be perfect all the time, that is just going to end up with disasters. So Carmy needs to tamp himself down. And shortly after disasters happen, when people start trickling into the restaurant, and you have his uncle, who I'm starting not to really like as a character, because I feel as though he's kind of amped up this year, but he's very stern with Carmy. And I know that, of course, obviously, he has a lot riding on this restaurant. He's backing it. He has a lot of his money put into it and things. So yes, he's going to be on Carmy's case, but no, he knows what Carmy is like, and it's just like putting oil on the flame, right? It's just inflaming a situation even more. And on a side note, Carmy's working with his sister, he's working with his uncle, he's working with his cousin, he's working with Richie, and he's working with a lot of people who are, family, friends, people who have been in his life for a very long time. They're very close, and like for me personally, there is no way in hell I would work that closely with my family and very close friends. I would go absolutely insane, because everyone's so close to each other. They're very invested in it. People feel like they can speak freely. These are a bunch of tense people to begin with, Carmy being number one. It's just a recipe for disaster. And we see like all these little fights back and forth. We've seen that the entire series, but we see how this really inflames the situation. When Sid comes in, Carmy tells her about this change to the menu, and she's a little taken aback. And he's like, well, I'm just, modifying slightly what we've worked on before, but yeah, we're going to do this. So again, we're seeing evidence of Carmy not collaborating the way he should with Sid, who is his partner. And Sid is taking it in stride, because I feel as though she knows, Carmy is probably sleep deprived right now, and he's acting up. And we know he's been on edge, of course, since the restaurant opened. And in a lot of ways, I feel as though Sid is Carmy's babysitter. And I don't really like that for her, because she's always the one who has to absorb the moods or tamp people down. Like even in this episode when Richie comes in and he says to Sid, oh, could you tell Carmy that this. So he's using her as a conduit to Carmy when they're right in each other's faces, they're in earshot, but they're being so silly and using that old dynamic that they've had probably their entire lives. And she has to be the mediator between the two of them. And it's just, it's too much. I would not be able to handle that. When Sid finally gets Carmy to admit that the reason why he is doing this daily menu change is so that he can push her and she can push him, and, ultimately to get the Michelin star, right? And so, yes, I do believe he believes that. And I do believe that changing it would help in that effort. But along the way, there are so many other parts. It's not just Sid and Carmy. There are a lot of other people, and he has to think realistically as to what as to how this new change will actually help them. We see him with Nicorette gum, I think at the beginning when he was talking to the delivery guy. And so, yes, he says he's quitting smoking because he needs to save the time, going on smoke breaks and so on. And this is going to sound like a funny thing. Obviously I know a lot of people smoke, and I understand. I've never smoked before, but I do understand it must be very difficult to quit smoking. But, most people want to do it for whatever reasons they have. And if anyone were to ask me my opinion, should I quit smoking? I would say yes. With Carmy, now, I think quitting smoking is a terrible idea. It is way too much. For him, chemically, like in his body, he will have nicotine withdrawals. He'll be even more irritable and upset than he naturally is. And of course, the restaurant just opened, so that just heightens things. So this is another example where I don't think Carmy is really thinking things through. Because, yeah, you might say 5 minutes, every hour or however often he does smoke. But now is not really the time. Or maybe, I don't know his whole regimen. I don't know if he's weaning, like maybe taking, one thing of gum and then smoking once, then another thing of gum. Like, I don't know, whatever it is. But I would not suggest quitting smoking at this time. It's just too many things. Like with him, he likes to pile on too many things to each other. And that's where I see the lack of self-awareness and the lack of having that degree of foresight with him that I feel as though he really needs to get a hold of. I was just looking at the clip where Richie and Carmy had that back and forth fight argument and thinking Carmy's sleep deprived, nicotine or cigarette deprived, he's implementing all these changes. It's just, he's like a powder keg. He is just so not in a good space. And I just think his poor heart. I noticed, I didn't think I saw a smartwatch on his, or a fitness tracker on his wrist. I could imagine his blood pressure and his heart rate is always elevated. And so that's why I feel so bad for Sid, where she has to tell him to SCFU, because it's just, they're bringing the temperature so high. And I can't imagine being in a work environment where everyone's screaming all the time and you've got your partner who you respect so much in so many different ways, but then he acts like a baby, he acts like a petulant child for a good chunk of the time because he's making small but stupid decisions constantly. Or actually they're big decisions, but he's making a lot of dumb decisions on a constant basis that he could very easily prevent. And yeah, when more people trickle in and they question him about the menu change every day, and they say that's a crazy idea, then he takes it internally. I'm not crazy. And this took me back to last year when he was in the fridge and he's yelling at Richie from across the door. And then Richie mentions Donna, like his mom, which we all know how she is. And I don't know. Again, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but we do see, that episode Fishes last year was very revealing as to what Carmy grew up with constantly. And I'm not saying he's exactly like his mom. I can't exactly say what her diagnosis is or whatever, but there are some similarities. So I think that this is something that Carmy harbors. He has this idea that, I might end up like my mom, or, getting so depressed and, doing what Mikey did, right? So again, he's got a lot going on. And again, when he has more people coming in saying, maybe this isn't a great idea, he should take the time to listen to that. And maybe they can do the daily change, after the restaurant's been open for 3 months or 6 months or what have you, but doing that now. And this is a side note, and I don't know what things are like now, but I remember listening or reading something about food critics and restaurant critics in New York and Chicago and stuff. This was pre-pandemic. And they were saying that a lot of times these magazines or newspapers, they don't review restaurant for either 3 or 6 months or maybe even a year, but it's many, many months before they review a restaurant because it takes time for the restaurant to get its sea legs, right? It's not going to be perfect from the jump. There are a lot of different moving parts. They might not even be around in a year. That's one thing. So the idea that Carmy thinks it's smart to do this massive shift now is just so ill-advised, and he needs to take things into consideration. And then at one point, Richie brings up the topic of Claire, and that is a sore subject, as it should be a sore subject. I have a lot of opinions on the Claire-Carmy relationship, and I'll save them for when Claire comes onto the screen. But I'll say this. That relationship should not have happened. Claire, I think she tried way too hard, and Carmy was not in the place to be in a relationship that serious with somebody who felt the way Claire did. But yeah, when she shows up, I will mention that. But she is a topic of discussion for the rest of the episode, for the bulk of the episode, where one of the I forget his name, but he mentioned that he saw her at a party and that she seemed okay. And everyone trickles in like, oh, Claire? What about Claire? Oh, Claire. So everyone's up in Carmy's business, or I guess his ex-business, which is also very awkward. And again, these people are very intimate with each other in terms of their closeness, and, you know, they feel free to talk about Carmy almost like he's not there, which I'm sure Carmy does not like, and just adds to the stress of the entire situation with the friendship and the working at the restaurant. I thought it was funny when he mentioned, like, no, we're all cool with Claire here. Like, I saw her at the friend's party. We're all cool. Like, we're, like, up here, and you're down here. Or I can't say it. Oh, you're down here. And so it's like, yeah, you're, like, CTA level, which I thought was funny, a cool little Chicago reference. And then when people were asking, like, you know, what actually did happen with Claire? I only heard, like, little bits, like, what happened? And he said that, you know, it wasn't going to work because he is the way that he is. And everyone looks at him like, oh, Carmy. And it's such a sad thing for him to feel and to be comfortable to say, which I think in a way, again, I'm not a psychologist, I think it's good that he feels comfortable to say that about himself, but I also think he's being way too hard on himself. And that's why I think he's such a sympathetic character, and he needs to be easier on himself in so many different ways. And I think he could start with being easier on himself when he's at the restaurant. And I love Richie. Like, one thing I really do enjoy about this show is the different viewpoints, different like socioeconomic classes, I guess, and also the different generational points, right? So you've got like Richie, who's a Gen X, you've got Carmy, who's a millennial. They've had very different life experiences and so on. And then like for Richie to mention his philosophy on tipping, it's like, okay, sure, yeah, when you go to a play, you just pay for the play, even though Carmy's like, you go to plays, are you that cultured? Which is another dig. But yes, okay, I can understand the debate about tipping culture as well. But it's like, this is not the time to bring up your philosophy on tipping culture. For one, you're not going to be able to change it, Richie. You don't run the show. And also, it's like, we don't really care about your philosophy on it right now. We've got bigger fish to fry. And that is something that if it really irritates you so much, you know, maybe being in the restaurant business isn't the right place for you, at least right now. But that's an aside. But of course, that leads to some more back and forth between Carmy and Richie. And then things come to a head, things come to a stop when Marcus shows up, and everyone stops because they haven't seen him since his mom died. And so he mentions, like, you know, being here is what is going to make him happy and what his mom would have wanted, and that he knows that he has faith in Carmy. And so, yeah, so he and Carmy go off to the side and they talk, and Carmy mentions to him, you know, obviously, you know, I'm here for you, you know, after your mom's death, and you should feel free to speak to us, speak to a professional or whatever. And then Marcus asks, did you do that when Mikey died? And, you know, the answer is no. And Carmy says no, like maybe he should have. So again, I like to see that kind of growth from Carmy, that self-awareness. And, you know, he's there to help, even though he might not have the answers, or he might not be the comfort that Marcus needs in particular. He's there to help him. And then Marcus says to him, you know, I need you to take us there, i.e. take the restaurant to new heights, push us. And again, this is what Carmy wants to do. And he's going to do it. His ideas right now aren't so good. I don't think so, not really. for the time being, but he is there to push everybody and do the best he can. As I mentioned at the top, this episode was a return to form for the bear. Again, episode 1, I will still hold, it was not up to standard for me, for the bear. This one was. And it was nice that, for about 95% of the episode, we were in the kitchen. We saw everyone trickle in throughout the entire episode. So we reintroduced them and reacclimated to them. And yes, Carmy, again, is one of my favorite characters of TV of all time. And I just want the best for him. I want him to do the best in the restaurant. I want him to feel healed. I want him to feel safe. I know that sounds really airy-fairy, but I just want him to do the best he can. And yeah, again, I won't go into details, but one of the reasons why I'm so have such an affinity for Carmy's character is that we have a lot of the same characteristics, a lot of the same personality traits, and I won't get into which ones, but we have a lot of the same characteristics, and so I just want him to do well. And so I'll be back later with a review of episode 3. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Do you agree with me that this episode next is much better than the episode tomorrow, episode 1? I still hold that episode 1 was not up to scratch. This one was perfect. I love it. I want Carmy to do well. I want Sid to do well. I want there to be less tension. So anyway, look out for episode 3's recap in a little while, or review in a little while. And I'll see you later here on I See Melanie. Okay? Bye.